There you go. All right, welcome to this non-duality Zoom with Richard Sylvester. Thank you, Richard, for being here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And thank you for coming, everybody that's in the Zoom or watching live on YouTube. Please keep your microphones muted until invited to speak. This is being shared live on YouTube, so by asking a question, you're giving consent to be on YouTube. So we encourage you to raise your hand virtually after the brief introduction by unmuting yourself and turning on your camera. Alternatively, you can write your questions in the chat if you're watching on YouTube. And with that, I will turn it over to Richard for an introduction to non-duality. And there you go.
Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
I noticed you used the phrase brief introduction. Well, we'll see.
Well, that's entirely up to you.
Well, we'll see. I have no idea at this point whether it'll be 30 seconds or longer or whatever. We'll see. So let me start somewhere just for the sake of getting this rolling. Non-duality. I'm going to start this the way I often start meetings. The heart of non-duality is that there is no self. We often come across the phrase, some of us use the phrase often, seeing non-duality. In a way, it's a ridiculous phrase, but it kind of points to something. So for me, if seeing non-duality means something, it means seeing what I've just said, seeing that there is no self, the direct seeing. It has nothing to do with understanding. It has nothing to do with concepts. There can be a seeing of non-duality with no understanding whatsoever, and there can be a head filled with concepts about non-duality with no seeing whatsoever. So what we're talking about here, the only thing I'm interested in is the possibility of the direct seeing of non-duality. I nearly used the word experience there, the direct experience of non-duality, but experience is a bit of a misleading word, because an experience is something which is possessed by or owned by an individual, a person. So I'm deliberately using this word seeing non-duality because it just sounds that little bit more kind of third-party abstract sort of thing. In other words, it kind of takes the idea of the person out of it, because the fact is, again, something I say a lot of the time, something other speakers and writers say, is that as long as there's a person here looking for non-duality, non-duality can't be seen. It's like the person is like a kind of brick wall, which prevents non-duality being seen. It's really, really frustrating, this. I mean, if you are or have been, like I was, a spiritual seeker, I was a very sincere spiritual seeker for many years, this is really frustrating stuff, because behind the whole impulse of spiritual seeking, in some way or other, is the feeling or the belief or the concept that I can somehow get myself to something called whatever we call it, liberation, enlightenment, awakening, seeing non-duality. And even a split second of awakening, a split second of seeing this as it actually is, and as it actually is simply nothing unfolding as everything without a person there to mediate it. Even just a split second of seeing that can just wipe away those years, in my case, about 30 years of spiritual seeking, and just render them, not sure what to use here, certainly render them redundant, but in a way, kind of humor, like a joke, but I mean, like a kind of good humored joke. It's often said, or it's often reported, that when non-duality is seen, sometimes there's a spontaneous outburst of laughter. And my suggestion is that sometimes at least that laughter is about seeing the joke that I could ever feel, that I could find my way to something which can only be seen with my own disappearance. In other words, the joke that I could ever make myself disappear. So we're talking about an absolute mystery here. We're talking about something we're using words which are of the mind to talk about something which is completely and utterly beyond the mind. And we can puzzle over this for months, years, decades, but a split second of awakening and the puzzling can stop. I'm pausing there because I'm just half remembering a little tiny quote I sometimes throw in from the Upanishads. I mean, I am not an expert on the Upanishads. However, I came across this quote in a book, and I think it just sums it up wonderfully. If I can even think of half of it, it's worth just putting out there. It's something like the lightning strikes, the eye blinks. Then we have either seen or we have not seen. And I mean, that just expresses just the kind of absolute, beyond anything we think we are of this. This is a strike of lightning. It's instantaneous. And then we've seen or we haven't seen. And that particular quote then goes on in a way I could say rather unkindly, but in another way accurately. It just goes on and finishes by saying, if we have not seen, too bad. And that's really tough, actually. I mean, there's nothing particularly kind or spiritual or empathic about that, but it does have the one virtue that it's accurate. This is like a flash of lightning, and it's seen or it's not seen. And there's nothing, maybe this is the most challenging thing of all that I'll say, and I'm going to stop this introduction here, maybe. There's nothing that who I think I am can do about this. So we could say, I am completely helpless in this, except of course there is no I. So to say I am completely helpless in this is as misleading as to say I can find liberation. They're both misleading because there is no I. So I think I'll stop this introduction here and we'll just see what happens.
Okay, great. Thank you, Richard. So if you have a question and you're here and okay, there we go. Wyatt. I see you raising, there you go.
Thank you. Richard, could you, going straight in, could you clarify when you talk about meaningless? You see something, there's only an appearance of everything out of nothing. There's only processes, there's no entity of a person. But what then constitutes meaningless? Your ability to say from that it is meaningless. It feels as if that doesn't, that's gone over the top of interpreting something.
It's
as if if there are only waves, if no particles, that doesn't make the waves meaningless.
Yeah. Again, everything that maybe not everything I say this evening, but a lot of what I say this evening is really just an attempt at a description. So one of the reason I say that is because what's often reported, certainly reported here, is that, and again, I use this phrase again, even a split second of awakening. And there can be a split second of awakening and then the person can come back. But even that can reveal that this isn't going anywhere. It is simply what it is. And because it isn't going anywhere, it doesn't have any meaning. For it to have meaning, it has to be going towards something, and it's not doing that. Another way of putting this, if you like, is that this doesn't need meaning because it is complete in itself. Meaning is, meaning is concept, meaning is intellect. I'm not in any way denigrating meaning on the kind of everyday level. I mean, I'm a bit of an intellectual myself. I love playing with meanings and examining meaning on that level. But when it comes to any suggestion, as we have, for example, on many spiritual paths and, for example, on many religious paths, that this has a kind of overriding meaning, that it is going somewhere, we are going somewhere, there is a path that it is better for us to follow than not to follow, that's all just revealed as a huge joke, because there is just this. It's timeless and it ain't going anywhere. The person does live in time, and so the person does seem to be going somewhere. For example, over here in England, it's 7:10, and this individual seems to be going towards their supper after this meeting. Well, that's what it's like for the person, but actually there is just this. There's just what appears to be happening right now. And I'll just say one other thing, and then I'll, let you come back if you want to. I say this a lot in meetings, and I think what needs to be followed up with that is that when I say there is just this, it's a way of saying there is no time, there's no past, there's no future, there is just this. I want to suggest, whenever I say that in a way that is an incredibly challenging thing to say, because we all live in what seems to be a flow of time. I have a memory of something I was apparently doing this afternoon. I have an expectation of a supper I will be eating later tonight. So obviously the character Richard lives in something called time. And yes, in another way, I want to suggest it is equally obvious if that just drops, there is just this. And I'm very deliberately not saying there is just this moment or there is just this second, because a moment or a second have a duration. It's not even that. It's like there is just this kind of, I'm going to say, razor thin sliver of apparent activity. It's not even, I mean, razor thin is the best image I could reach for, but it's not even razor thin. This isn't it. This isn't a second. It's not a half second. It's not a quarter second. There is just this. In this, memory of something called the past and expectation of something called the future may arise. So there's no meaning. It's not going anywhere. But the mind loves meaning and may well construct many, many meanings around God or gods and enlightenment and spiritual paths and so forth, or many other things.
Well, I can see why you want to torpedo that. I completely understand why you want to torpedo that. And you've talked about movement. Of course, if there's movement, there is time, unless you could speak at the speed of light, which you can't, But you mentioned character, and if you don't mind, my second question is about
can I come back on movement? Because
yeah.
I'm going to say something I often say, and it's going to say, obviously it's going to sound completely paradoxical, and I'll just throw it out there. We can talk about it more or not as you like. Stillness and movement are the same thing. Movement is stillness moving, just as silence and sound are the same thing. Sound is simply silence making a noise, if you like. If we are standing in one of the most moving and one of the most sounding places in London, for example, Piccadilly Circus on a Saturday afternoon, and this is seen, it will be seen that all that movement and sound, traffic roaring and rushing around of tourists is absolutely still and completely silent.
Mm.
And it's part of that's another reason why meaning may collapse. Because, for example, as a spiritual seeker, I may feel like, okay, what's going to give meaning to my life for the next 6 months is I'm going to go on a pilgrimage to the most holy temple that I've heard about, halfway up a mountain in Japan, which is so still and silent because it's so holy, and I'm going to meditate there. Won't that be wonderful? Well, it may be wonderful, it may be not, but it's a ridiculous idea, because when this is seen, it's seen that Piccadilly Circus on a Saturday afternoon is just as still and just as silent as the most holy temple on earth.
Mm. Yeah.
Total mystery. But one split second of seeing can, oh yeah, absolutely. I can't understand it. The mind can't make sense of it, but yes, now it's known. It's known to be the case.
And that is incredibly freeing. Must be. Yeah.
It's freeing for no one.
Yes.
It's freeing for no one. It reveals that there is no one who needs to be free.
Yeah.
So it's not freeing for anybody. It's not freeing for any person, but it reveals that there is no person who needs to be free.
Can I just come back to what you say about character? Because there's an awful lot of consciousness that isn't, I don't know if you know about Julian James's work, but you know, there's a lot of consciousness. There's a lot of non-consciousness and unconsciousness that goes on in the body in terms of perhaps genetic predispositions, all that sort of thing. That isn't thinking of self-reflection of I'm a person. And I wonder if in some ways you're relegating that to this sort of remaining character. You know, the absurd thing is whether you do or don't like Marmite, you know, or whatever the answer is.
I think all I can say at this point is I don't understand the question. So if you could maybe rephrase it, you know, you're saying something about consciousness. We could very much argue or discuss, and maybe we will later, whether that's even a concept that needs considering. But I haven't really got what the question's about there.
Well, I think probably what I'm saying is that what I don't want to say you have no longer got, but I don't even say your understanding, but some part of this sort of entity which thinks you're a person has clearly gone, but that's not fullness of, that's quite a narrow view of what's happened, of consciousness perhaps, and that there's an awful lot that goes on in the body in terms of self-regulation of the body, all sorts of things, even sorts of things that you'd say were non-conscious, wouldn't you?
You mean sort of like the autonomic systems and so on?
Yes,
Like
yes,
the
all
heartbeat.
those sort of things, or even, yeah. But
I mean, unless I mean, all I can say to that at this point, come back on me, obviously, but all I can say at this point is that unless the seeing of this coincides with physical death, then the heartbeat will simply go on. And the breathing will simply go on. The digestion system will simply go on.
yeah.
Obviously, that won't be the case if this coincides with physical death.
But don't you think that things perhaps have been introjected before this happened to you, which now unconsciously do influence what thoughts process goes through you non-consciously? Because you haven't got there's no person that you're having thoughts with, but thoughts are still going through you, aren't they?
Yes, thinking still happens. I'm going to phrase it like that. The problem with the word thoughts is it kind of objectifies something which is simply constant movement. So thinking still happens. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking still happens. Thinking arises. It's simply seen that thinking, like everything else, simply arises. In other words, there is no, again, I'm going to use this word entity. There is no entity. There's no I. There's no self.
Yes.
Thinking. There is no mind which is thinking. There is simply thinking which creates the impression that there is a mind.
And I think probably why I've just suddenly had this idea of an iceberg, and there's still all that going on underneath the water. And you, importantly, have lost the bit above the water.
When you say an iceberg and stuff going under the water, I presume you mean what in kind of conventional terms we consider the unconscious and da 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 da, and all of, yeah, whatever, yeah, whatever arises, but there isn't an entity behind it.
Yeah.
So in other words, again, I think I've already said this. I'll just say it again to emphasize it. It's all process. It's
Yeah.
all process, not entity.
You could tell I'm still trying to understand, but thank you very much.
Yeah, and I mean, I was trying to understand this very, very frustratingly for I don't know how long, a year or two or whatever. It's hugely frustrating. It's quite natural for the mind to try to understand it, and it can't be understood, and it won't be understood. And it doesn't matter how often the mind hears that, it's not going to give up trying to understand it. However, again, even a split second of direct seeing, and then the mind can just go, oh, God, no.
Well,
In other
thank you.
words, at least at that point, if nothing else happens, the mind might simply relax. But this mind worried away at this stuff like a bone for at least a year, possibly longer after being exposed to it.
Yeah.
Well,
After what I sometimes call the catastrophe of coming across Tony Parsons.
thank you, Wyatt. And
Thank
we
you.
have Howard Chance is up next. Has a question, has his hand raised. Go for it, Howard. Yep, there you go.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi.
Hey, I could, just there's nothing really I want to ask. It's just that I want to say that I've listened to some of your stuff, and I love the way you're answering questions right now. I love what you're saying. There's something that I want to ask, but I know that it's frustrating because there's no way to be able to answer these things and stuff. So I can, it's like there's full on frustration, on both ends, in that if we were trying to understand each other. However, what I really want to do is just talk about. Um, I get what you're saying as far as like motion and stillness. I'm constantly saying that, and there's the thing about time. For me, it's time and timelessness. At the same time, it's like the infinite and the finite are both not only subjective and not happening, but also happening simultaneously. And it seems like to me, now this is the one thing that I know it's not really what you're saying tonight. However, um, I would just like to say that it seems like you can come 360, and the appearance can be separate if it wants to. I mean, non-duality is dual, and dual is non-duality, as far as I can see. And what I'm saying is, the individual appearance can come full circle, almost, it seems like to me, and start, basically begin where they or end where they begin, or however you want to say that. But it just seems that I feel that a lot of what you say is brilliant and beautiful, and I want to say thank you for doing this, and it was I love that intro, and I think I'll watch a couple more things, a couple more of your things, and I hope that I can talk to you sometime in the future about how the self, as an appearance, seems to interact with that foundation. And I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just want to say thank you, and I love what you're saying. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Howard.
Can I just comment on that thing you raised about time and the beginning and the end and so forth? It reminds me, there's some lines in T.S. Eliot, "In my end is my beginning," and then another line that I can't remember the exact line, but we go on this search, we leave the place where we begin, and we go on this
Right.
search, And then finally, we come back to the place where we began, and we see the
Exactly.
important part. We see it for the first time. And when this
It's,
strikes, doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing,
Yeah.
it's like you see this for the first time.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant way, it's a brilliant way of putting it. So it's
I,
like
you know, I was actually, please go ahead, sir.
no,
Sorry.
it's like there, there is no path, there is no journey, there is nowhere to get to. But for the person, the individual, there seems to be a path, there seems to be a journey. And if that path ever, I'm going to say, completes itself, because we can't complete it, if it ever completes itself, it's with the realization that we never left home.
Yeah. You never, you don't go anywhere. You
You
know?
don't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's but the oddest sense for me is that um because, and I'm just gonna throw some stuff out here, but because understanding and knowledge are completely irrelevant in regards to these subjects, um it still feel, it's just this funny little combo of duality and non-duality, and that it just seems like they're needed, you know, to that's how it feels to me. It seems like non-duality and duality, separation and non-separation, they kind of perpetuate themselves um, into this. You don't go anywhere or do anything. However, at the same time, um, there is no edge or limit to what can be seen. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a duration of a swim, but the depth of the dive, so to speak. And like you said, a lightning bolt, bam, it doesn't, and it's infinite in that sense of that moment. And every moment appears as that moment in its own right after the fact. You never can go back. And at the same time, there is no time. And at the same time, you can be in any time time just ceases to mean the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not a linear chain of events, and it just seems as you can both.
Oh my God, now he's mad.
Yeah, time, the appearance of time arises out of the timeless.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, sir.
Seems that there is something happening. It seems that there is the appearance of something happening. I don't know why. There was something about what you
How
were
I changed
saying.
my meeting name.
There was something about what you were saying made me want to
Well, my name appearing.
to throw in this. There was a guy called Mike Reed who lives in the north of England, and he saw this and he wrote about it a bit. And he had a dog, and he called his dog Love, or he referred to his dog after this seeing as Love in a Fur Coat. So this is, seeing this in its fullness is like seeing that everything is love. And that, again, I'm aware can be an astonishingly challenging thing for the mind to hear. Absolutely hugely challenging. But nevertheless, that's as good a description, this is as good a description as we can give, because, like other speakers, other writers, I refer to this as both as seeing emptiness, as seeing fullness, as both empty and full. It's perfectly legitimate for the mind, if you like, or obvious for the mind to come in and say, well, if it's full, what's it full of? And there's no satisfactory answer to that, but the least unsatisfactory answer is it's full of unconditional love. It's full of unconditional love. I guess in kind of, the sort of normal terms, maybe, maybe a dog gets about as close to that for some people as anything can. So I just love that little description from Mike when he's seen this, that his dog was love in a fur coat. This is love speaking. This is love listening.
Yeah.
That's really, really, I mean, I could go on and say, I'm not gonna make things difficult for myself. If one of you want to make life difficult for me by asking the obvious question, go ahead. But I'm not going to voluntarily make life difficult for myself by listing some of the other things. But you know, this is love. This is love waving a hand. This is love wearing headphones. This is love, etc., etc., etc. If you like, you know, there's no everything and it's not made of anything, but if there was an everything made of something, everything's made of love. What kind of love? Unconditional love.
Well, I agree in that um everything doesn't have to be so rigid. And the funniest thing is that it's not that there's separation. Separation isn't separate to me. And it seems like dual and non-dual are not, you know, mutually exclusive at all. They are the same thing. It's like the lack of opposites soften this idea that, you know, it must be one way or another. And in fact, it kind of yeah, it just evaporates the lines. And unconditional love I cannot agree more. You know, yeah, there's something that was being said earlier. I had something else to say about, but I forgot. But what you said about the unconditional love, I can't agree more. The you know, for me, uh, I wish I could remember what you guys were talking about a couple of minutes ago. But in any case, I just want to say thanks because it's beautiful to hear. You know, the actuality that it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, one way or another. It can't be, you know. And there, you know, there are some things I think I might say that might be a little too hokey. However, in the end, it's just unconditional love being that way, and just grateful. It's a great day. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. And Razia is up next.
Hello, Richard, and everyone else.
Hiya.
What I was going to ask you, Richard, was is there a physically manifested universe?
Is there physically manifested what?
Universe. I mean, that we are seeing, you know?
Oh, right. In the appearance, yes, of course. In the appearance, yes, of course. I mean, this is physical in the appearance. That's all I can say.
It's like we have like this shared overlay that we all are seeing at the same time. We have this shared overlay that we all are seeing at the same time.
Yeah, that can't be known.
Then,
it can't be known, but I mean, the best, you know, it's a kind of good working assumption. It works, doesn't it, to make that assumption, but it can't be known. I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff that can't be known. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that most stuff can't be known. So
okay,
that's all I can say.
But into this overlay, into this overlay, we are apparently projecting our own realities or whatever. Like we are projecting what we see onto this. Like I don't see a chair. I probably would look at the chair and see it as a tool that someone hits someone with. You know what I mean? So there is like a kind of projection. So looking at this now, each of us looks at the world and we see a different reality.
Well, again, I'm just going to say that can't be known. I mean, it's a good working assumption. It's a good working assumption. But I would say, going back a little bit, that actually, you know, we don't each, if you like, project our own universe because there is no each of us. It may seem like that. If we're going to talk on a kind of psychological or quantum physics level or anything like that, yeah, that kind of makes sense. It's a reasonable description or whatever. But of course, it's misleading because actually there is no one who is projecting anything. I mean, that's the whole point in a way of this. There is no
Yeah.
person, there is no self who can project anything. But in terms of having an
Yes.
everyday conversation, which we're not having here, you know, what you're saying, you know, it makes perfect sense and it's a perfectly reasonable assumption.
Yes. Okay.
It
Because
takes
I
us
mean,
in a, it takes us in a very, it takes us in a completely different direction to what we're talking about here.
okay. No. I mean, I'm going to what is the reality, you know?
You're
Because I
going to
mean,
what?
like now, I would say, from my point of view, or from what you have just said, that there is nothing happening, obviously, and there's no one here that's seeing anything that's happening. Okay, but when I go to sleep at night, do all entities go to sleep, or aren't they functioning as well?
Well, firstly, you don't go to sleep at night because there is no you. Sleep happens. That's what I'm going to say. But taking the question on the kind of, you know, on the level in which you're asking it, again, I'm going to say it can't be known. We can theorize about it. We can philosophize about it. People are capable of writing entire books just on that one question and have written entire books just on that one question. Ultimately, however, it can't be known. It's a kind of, you know, mind play. It's a, you know, it's all of this stuff is kind of stuff that the apparent mind, some apparent minds really love to play with. But essentially it
Yes.
can't be known. I mean, I very occasionally, but only very occasionally, kind of take, you know, notice that there are many hours of videos being made and put on YouTube about consciousness and what it is and how to explain it and blah, 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 blah. And I'm kind of, you know, a bit astonished because it's kind of sort of blindingly obvious that that is never going to go anywhere. But, you know, it's entertaining for some people. People kind of pass the time by making videos apparently explaining consciousness, and other people pass the time watching videos apparently explaining consciousness. It's complete nonsense, but so what? You know, people find it fun, it's fun, you know.
Okay, yeah,
It
all
can't,
right.
it
So
can't most the trouble in a way, I mean, obviously this is a Q&A session in a way, you know, question, answer, discussion, whatever. But the trouble is that most questions can't actually be answered. Or if you like, the answer to most questions is that's unknowable. Not that's unknown, but that's unknowable, which is a completely different thing.
okay, and then another simple thing, like let's take Nazakadatta,
Yep.
and he says, "I am that."
Yep.
What does he refer to?
I like that.
Like,
I'm going to be very cautious. I think I'm too far away from my bookcase, but I am that on my bookcase. I'm going to be very cautious in how I frame the question, right? I can't say what Nisargadatta meant by that. I can say what I think he meant by that. And what I think he meant by that, you know, I think it's wonderful because it's you know, to my way of looking at it, it's a really neat way of encapsulating what we're talking about, that when the self collapses, one of the things that is so shocking is that it is seen that there is no difference between here and there. There is no difference between this and that. There is no difference between me, who seems to be here, and everything else which seems to be out there. In other words, I and that, here and there, if you like, I and that, I over here and that over there, are the same thing, because in the seeing of this, one of the things that's seen is that space collapses as well as time. Time and space are simply seen as non-existent. So that's my reading of what Nisargadatta means. If it actually was what he meant, then I love it. But of course, he's not here. I can't ask him. So that's just my best guess. Maybe he meant something completely different. But that's
yeah,
what it
it's
means.
like
That's what it means to
asking,
me.
it's
There
like
is
people
no
asking,
space.
like me asking you, "Who are you? Who are you?"
Who am I?
Like he said, I am that now, and
Yeah.
I am asking you, who are you? You
I'm
know,
the
kind of
same as who
thing.
you are. I am, well, slightly different. I am oneness, Richarding. I'm sorry, I haven't got your name.
Razia.
Vazia. So you are
Vazia.
oneness, Vaziering. Walter is oneness, Waltering. Lynn Marie is oneness, Lynn Marieing. I am Richard. I am oneness, Richarding. That's who I am. That's who you are.
So we all are the same, just expressing differently.
We are
That's what
all the
you say.
same.
And yet different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we're oneness. We are all, each of us, if you like, oneness personing. And the difference comes in with the personing bit. Yeah. Yeah.
And there is no person.
And there is no person, absolutely. I could say, if I wanted to be really careful, I could say we are all oneness charactering. There's a character, Richard. There's a character, Ben, Fred, Peter, David, Mary, Jane,
Die
Alfred,
Livestream das.
whatever.
Die sind komplett viel. Digga.
Is someone else talking? I can see.
Yeah, I think they've gone though. It's okay.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Okay.
It's just that sometimes you hear people talking about certain things, and then it doesn't seem to make like sense because one person is saying something and the other person is saying the complete opposite of what, you know?
There is that
But thank you.
indeed, but there is also, this does not make sense. It doesn't make sense. If you're looking for sense, look somewhere else other than this. This is not
Yeah.
about, this is not about finding something that makes sense. This is
So
again part of
ultimately,
the
at the end
shock
of
of
the,
seeing this.
yeah, I
Nothing
think
I
at the end of
believed
the
about the
day,
world
okay.
makes sense once this is seen.
Yeah,
Everything that I believe about the world is based on, let's say, assumptions, or if you like, perceptions, which turn out to be false. Like there's a past, like I had a past, like there's a person who has choices about what actions they take, like there's something called free will through which I can act on the world. All of that just collapses.
yes, but the memories remain. I
Yes.
mean, there's even after you shift, you have the memories which are your past. in
Yeah,
effect.
as I have written several times, this is not amnesia. There is something important to say here, though, and again, I've written about this. Memory remains. This isn't Alzheimer's. It's not dementia. Memory remains, but the emotional energy in those memories
Yes.
tends to collapse, tends to disappear.
Yeah.
So if you think of the kind of
Yeah.
emotions that are often bound up in the past, like guilt and regret and neurosis and things like that, they tend to collapse. But biographical memory, in other words, the data, the facts, the dates, the activities and so on, that remains. But it's usually felt to be far less important. The tendency for the person to go back into the past and in a meaningful way and wallow in it and feel about it and weep about it and feel guilt about it and regret about it, that all tends to collapse when it's seen that there was nobody who actually ever did anything.
Yeah, I agree with you about the emotional content of memories because over a period of time, it's like something that made you very sad now doesn't have the same effect. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We could say that the juice goes out of memory, the juice goes out of the past. The past, which doesn't exist, but nevertheless, the autobiographical information is still there. The juice goes out of it. The energy disappears from it.
All right. Thank you. We have lots of questions coming in the chat. Also, Howard Chance has his hand raised again. Go right ahead, Howard. Mr. Chance, did you raise your hand? If not, I will go to the next question in the chat. It says, Robbie. Okay, so this is from Robbie. Hello, thanks for the meeting. What do you have to say about this love appearing as feeling of extreme powerlessness, helplessness in the world, feeling like a child trapped in an adult's body? That's from Robbie on YouTube.
Yeah, I'd say that in talking about this, writing about this, for me, for anybody who does this, I'd say one of the most challenging things that is said, if it's said, and it is said here, is that this is unconditional love. You know, I mean, there are so many really obvious objections that could be made to that by the mind. And one of those, I'll call it an objection, maybe it's not, but you know, in a way, I hear that in this question. You know, it's just such a kind of startlingly obvious thing to ask about a statement. This is unconditional love happening. Really? Well, it doesn't look like it to the average human being. Some of it does, but an awful lot of it doesn't to the average human being. So why are you saying that, Richard? And there's plenty of other speakers that say that. And one of the things I usually say about this is if you take this phrase unconditional love, it's not the word love in it, which is the problem. It's the word unconditional. And the reason for that is, you know, okay, it's a mind that hears that phrase, unconditional love. It's a mind that objects to it, or it's a mind that questions it, or it's a mind that says, but how can that be? And it's because it doesn't understand the word unconditional. My suggestion is that most of us, almost all of us, I'm going to say everybody apart from the complete psychopaths, understand what love is to some extent. I'm not even going to go there and try to define it or describe it or explain it, or, you know, I'll leave that to the poets. They're much better than I am at that. You know, I would say that everybody kind of understands from some perspective what love is. The challenge in this phrase unconditional love is that word unconditional, because the mind can't get that. And the reason it can't get it is because the mind lives always in conditionality. And the point about the real challenge of that word unconditional is it actually means what it says. It actually does mean unconditional, and unconditional means embracing everything, including everything which the mind most hates, or the mind finds most distasteful, or the mind thinks is most far divorced from love. And so the mind cannot get it, you know, the mind can't get unconditional love. Unconditional love can only be seen directly by no one if the self collapses. And then it's revealed that this is an outpouring of unconditional love. And the mind comes back and says, what about this? What about that? What about the other? What about fights? What about arguments? What about war? What about, there's no answer to that that will satisfy the mind. What we're talking about here is a mystery. It's a complete mystery that when the self collapses, it's seen that this is, if you like, an outpouring of unconditional love. Something I sometimes, you know, add at this point, you know, I don't know if this phrase will make sense. I'll try to explain it a little bit. You know, I call this, you know, this is the mystical apprehension. What we're talking about here is got nothing to do with religion, obviously, got nothing to do with morality, I hope fairly obviously. Slightly less obviously, it's got nothing to do with spirituality. It's got nothing to do with spirituality. All of those things are tied up in some way with kind of what the mind finds moral and immoral and what the mind accepts and doesn't accept. This is the mystical apprehension. This is a mystical seeing, not a spiritual seeing. It's a miracle in a way that any of us bother to try to talk about this, and anybody bothers to try to listen to this, because, you know, one of the kind of most core points about, you know, the mystical apprehension is it can't be talked about. It can't be understood. Yeah, the title of one of the most famous mystical works in our culture is The Cloud of Unknowing. The Cloud of Unknowing. It's a cloud and it's unknowing. How do you talk about that? My favorite Christian mystic, who was put to death by the church in the story of time, said, she was a pretty tough lady. She said, this is many centuries ago, this is a mystery about which I can tell you nothing unless it is a lie. That's a pretty tough thing to say. What she's saying is, as soon as we open our mouth and start talking about this, it's a lie. What we're doing here tonight is lying to each other. Every non-duality book you ever read is full of lies. Every non-duality talk you ever listen to is full of lies, because this is a mystery and nothing can accurately be said about it. I mean, that's a very tough way of putting it. I'm not sure I would have put it that way. And she did end up being executed by the church. You probably found her quite tiresome for being so bold. I mean, she said plenty of other things to upset the church as well. You know, but there's a truth in that. You know, this is absolutely ineffable. And that reminds me of, I think it was it Alan Watts' lovely phrase, I'm trying to F the ineffable, or I'm trying to take some of the effing out of the ineffable. We are talking about that which cannot be put into words.
Someone asked what was her name.
Marguerite Poiret, and she wrote I don't know what to call it, a book. She wrote I'm just trying to think of the name of it. It's a miracle, if you believe in miracles, that it survived, because if the Catholic Church had found every copy of it, they've obviously destroyed every copy they could, but somehow one copy escaped their fire and eventually, you know, was made public. And it's called, I think, and you can find it on the internet, I'm sure, it's called A Mirror for Simple Souls. So it's got some other wonderful stuff in it. You know, if you want some light, mystical bedtime reading by a heretic who was burnt at the stake, then I can recommend it very highly. A Mirror for Simple Souls, I believe it was, Marguerite Poiret. But anyway, if I've got that slightly wrong, if you Google it, you'll find
I see Wyatt is talking about it in the chat if he wants to chime in. But
Oh, I love Margaret Poret. It's the mirror of simple souls, or some people
That's
say
it.
annihilated souls.
Right.
And I love the bit where she asks Love what to do, and Love answers and says, "This is the only thing I'm going to tell you. If you know your own nothingness, you'll know everything."
Isn't that wonderful? You know it better than I do then. Yeah, it's
I love
absolutely
Margaret
wonderful.
Poret. Absolutely wonderful, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the homework for after this session, the bedtime reading. A Mirror for Simple Souls. Yeah.
so Carolyn says, "Hi, Richard. Does awareness collapse with the seeing?
Can I
Awareness
just
would
say that
imply." Sorry.
I do think, sorry to butt in, I do think she almost certainly influenced Meister Eckhart.
Yeah.
Scholars will,
Yeah.
but some of the things that Meister Eckhart said follow very closely to her. And he was in Paris they think, about the time of when she was burnt to death.
Yeah. Mystics are incredibly threatening to organized religions, I hope for fairly obvious reasons. And Meister Eckhart was a mystic, and he managed to beat the church. He managed to cheat the church. They did not get their execution. He did it by a very simple way. He simply died before they could execute him. So, thumbs up for Meister Eckhart.
And what really upset the people who saw Margaret Poret being burnt to death was her utter calmness, which I find very affecting.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, this is from Carolyn on YouTube. Hi, Richard. Does awareness collapse with the seeing? Awareness would imply object subject.
Yeah, I would say very simply, and maybe we might unpick it a bit more, or I don't know. I would say no, awareness doesn't collapse on seeing because there's no such thing as awareness. I think awareness, and very, very tricky word, adds nothing to our understanding of anything except, kind of creates a lot of fun and games and YouTube videos. Awareness and consciousness, two very, very tricky words. I'm going to suggest, I don't know if this will work for you or for anybody, kind of works for me a bit. I'm going to kind of suggest that we can see through the trickery that goes on around the words like awareness and consciousness if we replace them with a much simpler word, which is experience. So in other words, we don't know what consciousness is or if consciousness is. We don't know if there is such a thing as awareness and if there is, what it is. But what we do know, what is directly known, the only thing that is directly known, in fact, is experience. So if I say there is experience, I think it's much, much more difficult to pick a fight with that than if I say there is awareness and it collapses or it doesn't collapse. There are people out there who will offer you teachings which will raise your consciousness, whatever that is, to the 37th level of awareness, whatever the hell that is. Well, my suggestion is you can make that much simpler with just that simple, there is experience. I'm going to argue that that's unarguable, but if somebody wants to come back to me and have an argument about that, we can do it if you want. There's experience. Does experience arise in consciousness? I have no idea, neither does anybody else.
I think Hank
Do we
had
need
his
awareness
hand
to be
raised.
aware of experience? I have absolutely no idea, and neither does anybody else. But we all know that there is experience.
Sir, did you have your hand raised, Mr.?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yes,
go right
yes,
ahead.
yes.
Yep.
Okay. Hello, Richard. This is my
Hi.
first Zoom meeting. So thank you for that. Can you tell me something more about emptiness? What you mean by that?
Yeah.
Is that nothing?
Is it?
Nothing?
Yes, it's nothing. It's the seeing of nothing. The seeing of emptiness is seeing that this is nothing appearing as everything. The appearing as everything is the fullness. The nothing is the emptiness. It's again, it's something, we could talk about it. Maybe the mind might partially understand it. That's really irrelevant. It doesn't really matter whether the mind understands it or not. But again, we could say, just literally, a split second of seeing, and it's just known, it's just seen that this is empty. It's also full. This is emptiness, if you like, manifesting fullness. And the fullness, as I think we've already covered, is love.
Unconditional love. Yeah.
Is unconditional love. Yeah. Yeah. But it's possible in awakening for simply the emptiness to be seen without the unconditional love. We could call that a kind of an initial awakening. And when that happens, as it often does, it's like this. So there's a kind of coldness to it because the unconditional love isn't seen. So it's a kind of cold emptiness. It can still be very attractive. It can still seem very attractive to the seeking person, but it's just emptiness is it's kind of cold. That's really all I can say.
Okay. And in one of your YouTube videos, you were talking about. Am I being heard?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. You were talking about addictive energy.
What kind of energy?
Addictive.
Okay, remind me.
Energy. Yeah, and I didn't quite understand what you meant by that.
No, I don't. You'll have to say more. I'm not connecting with that. Addictive energy.
Addictive energy. Yeah, it was outside the characters. Characters with preferences you talked about, and then yeah, something called addictive energy, and I didn't understand it at all. So that's my question.
No, I'm sorry about this. Without, I mean, I can't answer that without more context because I'm not connecting with it.
Okay,
I mean,
okay,
if
no,
we,
yeah, I
if we
can't.
had a whole sentence or whatever, I could.
No, I
connect with
haven't.
it.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's
No.
fine. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't know what the context was that I was writing that. Yeah, or saying it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else in the Zoom before I go back to the chat? Want to jump in? All right. Oh, go ahead, Giovanni.
I just wanted to say that regarding time and space, that the feeling that I have is that appearances, as soon as we concede that there are appearances, there must be time and space. There is no appearance without time and space.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's part of the whole set of appearances, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. In the appearance, there is time and space. Absolutely. Of course there is. Yeah. And it can be seen when, if you like, the one who is experiencing the appearance, when that one collapses, it can be seen that there is no time and space. I mean, this is a complete paradox. You know, the mind cannot reconcile these thoughts, if you like, or these words. And nevertheless, that's the experience when there is no one experiencing it. Yeah. Yeah. But this,
For the mind.
I mean, this, you can, yeah, this meeting now, it's an appearance. It can only take place because in the appearance, there is time and space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Timelessness is completely ungraspable for understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
yeah.
the very understanding is a function of time and space. The very understanding is an appearance, right? So it's impossible.
Yeah, when timeless, I mean, this is why I use the word seen. It's not a good word, but it's better than understood because there's nothing to do with understanding. When timelessness is seen, it's seen. It has nothing to do with the mind, nothing to do with understanding, nothing to do with concepts. Yeah. This is, I mean, this is why I mean, you know, the mystical apprehension is sometimes referred to as a direct seeing. And the directness is, it, if you like, short circuits the mind. It cuts out the mind.
I'm about to come up. All right. Natalie has her hand raised. Go ahead, Natalie.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Richard. Hi,
Hello.
Walter. I don't even know. Just when that emptiness is seen, it's almost just so inseparable. Well, it is inseparable from the fullness. And it just can't be unseen, even though seen isn't the right word. It's just underlying, it's just everything. You know, there's just, it's no qualities and then all the qualities, just not personal, you know? I don't know. I just thought I'd say that. I like you. I've listened to you a while back, and then there was kind of like a grasping, something was trying to think it could get a hold of this as a message and it could be used, you know, and that was just that energy of, you know, whatever you want to call it. But it's unknowable. I guess you could just say that self grasping to find something to hold on to work this out, to make this right and to get it. And when there's the impossibility of getting it right or wrong, it's just as it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Just as it is. Yeah. The self is always grasping for something that it can use or some way it can use anything, you know, to make advantage out of it, to make profit out of it, whatever. This is, I mean, that's again something that's so shocking about this, that this brings no advantages with it. It can't be used for anything.
It's useless.
It's
Utterly
useless. This is absolutely gloriously useless. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it has got a gloriousness to it. You know, that uselessness, the needlessness.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Yeah.
Well.
Nice chatting with you.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, anybody else in the Zoom? Otherwise, we have a question about personhood. What do you mean by personhood?
I suppose I can't have a bit more context, can I, in which I use that word? A sentence or something.
Oh, it just says,
What do I mean by personhood?
yeah.
I guess I mean, that sense of being, a separate individual, the sense that, most of us live most of our lives in. I'm over here, you're over there, we're separate. I'm an autonomous individual, maybe with something precious called free will, perhaps, living something equally precious called a life, maybe. That's kind of probably what I mean by personhood. Just really just a different way for the sense that the sense of separation, really, the sense that there's an individual here with free will and autonomy and a life that they lead, and a past and a future, and probably quite a lot of neurosis as well. Yeah.
How about your thoughts on the mind being a projector?
Yeah, well, the mind can't be a projector, I'd say, because there is no such thing as a mind. So the mind can't be or do anything. What we, what we think of as the mind, or maybe we might even say as experience as the mind, is just a flow. It's a flow of, I mean, the easiest way to describe it is a flow of thoughts, but of course it's more than that, a flow of thoughts, sensations, etc., etc. So there is no mind. There's just this constant movement, if you like, of energy. And we do with the mind what we do with this flow of thoughts and energies and perceptions, what we do with many things. We reify it. In other words, we turn it into a thing. Once we turned it into a thing, we can then philosophize about it and psychologize about it, of course, in the case of the mind. And so we can build up huge numbers of concepts around this thing, which is totally imaginary. And the mind is completely imaginary. It doesn't exist. And yet we have built up, 1,000 books, 1,000,000 books, theories, concepts, philosophies, psychologies, Freudian psychoanalysis, so forth, all predicated on the existence of this thing that doesn't exist, the mind. Now, the mind is an energy, if you like. It's a flow. I suppose it's a bit like, I mean, this is not an original, this is not an original simile, but I suppose it's a bit like sort of thinking of a river, as an entity. It's obviously not. It's a flow. A river is a flow of water. A mind is a flow of impressions, thoughts, etc., perceptions. Yeah.
All right, next question
Can I
is,
say just,
oh, yes, go right ahead, Gio.
okay, regarding mind, I have, this is an ongoing discussion, but if we accept that everything is a projection of the mind itself is a projection of mind. So we fall into an infinite regression and mind disappears. Obviously, this is an intellectual thought, but if
Yeah.
everything is just mind, mind is also just mind. So there is no mind.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Again, we could go back to the simplicity of, what is there? There's just this. What does that mean? Whatever's arising, whatever impressions are arising. And those impressions include thoughts, which we tend to associate with the mind, which doesn't exist. Yeah. There's just this. There's just whatever's arising, just whatever's happening.
it says, ask Richard to explain. Nothing actually happened.
Nothing actually happened. It's more likely I said or say nothing is actually happening. So I'll go for that. Yeah, I mean, it's a total mystery. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. All I can offer it is a description that when what we're talking about is seen, when the person collapses, then it's seen that nothing is actually happening. This is nothing actually happening. This hand waving around, this finger pointing, this voice sounding is nothing happening. It's nothing sounding. It's nothing waving. It's nothing pointing. This is nothing happening. Everything is nothing happening. If you like, it's an outpouring of everything from nothing. It's a mystery. It's a mystery.
All right. The next question is, to whom do these thoughts arise?
No one. Thoughts arise for no one. Thoughts arising may well create the impression that they are arising for a person, but the impression that they're arising for a person is just another thought arising. So thoughts arise out of nothing for no one, and then they die away.
How about there never were any meaningful stories? This is a quote from you.
Is it?
From one of your books. Yeah.
It's really embarrassing when I can't explain a quote from one of my own books. There never were. I think it would, I mean, I'm just guessing now, but I would imagine probably what I would probably saying was that in the kind of realization that I'm talking about here, there's a realization that there were never, all the stories never really had any meaning, never really had any importance. Probably that's what I meant. Without more of a quote to put it in context, I can't be sure, but I would say that. I mean, you know, I would think that's what it's certainly what I would say.
Here's another quote. Life is living us. What are your thoughts on that?
Is that a quote from me or from someone else?
You said it also. Yeah. At one
said,
point,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is life is living us. Yeah. We are not. I mean, probably, if I'm remembering it, it probably went on from or continued. Yes. I am not. Yeah, I am. I am not living life. Life is living me. Yeah. This is, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Life, you could say living itself. Yeah.
Here's a question from Robbie. Do you have anything to say to those who have heard this message and can't go back to seeking, but also haven't had the falling away of the illusory self? They are stuck in the middle.
Yeah. It's the most obvious thing to say, and it may or may not apply to the person asking the question. It applies to a lot of individuals. It certainly applied to me. It's painful. It's painful. You know, I know that. You know, in the story of time, in the kind of biography of this character called Richard, you know, I've been there, done that, and it's painful. And if that's what's happening, it's what's happening. It happened here. I used to ring Tony Parsons up and bother him about it. Yeah. And he'd come out with some hugely deep psychological and philosophical insight, like, have you thought of going and having a nice meal, Richard? Something like that. Yeah, it is. It's a okay, I'm going to throw this phrase in now as it just popped into my head. You know, it's a bit of a dramatic phrase. Almost everybody's come across it. The dark night of the soul. For a lot of apparent individuals, there can be this period of time which is sometimes poetically referred to as the dark night of the soul. When there's been, we could say, like a partial realization, or at least a collapse of all the old beliefs. And then we're in a kind of another image for it is then we're kind of in a desert. We just feel lost in a desert. Yeah, it happens. Yeah. What to do about it? Find some small, simple thing that's enjoyable and try and do it, you know. But it's absolutely well, it's absolutely unavoidable. It's not for everybody, but it is absolutely unavoidable that for some apparent people, this period of time in a desert where it's like hope is gone, but this hasn't been seen, and there's despair happens. One of the things I do often point out is that despair is in some ways better than hope, because hope is very tiring. As long as there's hope, you've got to be doing something. Come on, get off your lazy arse and meditate longer, or whatever it might be. When there's genuine despair, I mean, I'm not saying of course it's difficult. Of course it is. I understand that. But there can also be some relaxation, some relaxing into genuine despair. It's really, there is nothing I can do. Of course, it's far worse than that. There is no one who can do anything. But let's stick with there is nothing I can do. You know, and the beauty of that may be that in that realization, there is nothing I can do, is there can be a kind of a sort of relaxation into that. There may be. For quite a few people, there are. I usually at this point, when this comes up, quote that line from that John Cleese film, Clockwise, where he says, it's not the hope. He said, it's not the despair. I can stand the despair. It's the hope I can't stand. Hope drives you on. So hope is a very hard taskmaster. In genuine despair, there is nothing that can be done. So maybe there'll be some relaxation. But it is tough. Yeah, I understand that.
The next question in the chat says, do the words that come out of Richard's mouth arise as a thought first?
Usually not, no. No, not usually. But when I stop and stare into space and look worried, then there's some thinking going on probably. Usually when that happens, it's I have a very, very poor memory. And usually when that happens, it's because, you know, something knew what it was going to say 10 seconds ago, but in the intervening 10 seconds, it disappeared. So then there's a kind of thinking about it. But no, usually it just comes out. Yeah. Actually, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Kingdale Clark says, Walter, can you ask Richard his thoughts on what Sailor Bob Adamson says when he calls it space-like awareness, one without a second?
Can you give me the quote again?
It says space-like awareness, one without a second.
Space-like awareness. I shouldn't really comment on what Sailor Bob said, because I don't know what he meant by that. I mean, space-like awareness kind of, yeah, it has a kind of resonance for me, because there is a kind of, you know, it's like, you know, there's here and there, and then suddenly there's no here and there. So there is just everywhere. Well, everywhere that could be pretty damn spacious everywhere. So I might say that. The second phrase I can't make anything of, but it's difficult to comment on what somebody else might have said. I find it difficult enough commenting on what I meant when I said something, let alone what somebody else said. I'll leave that at that. Yeah.
Okay. Next one is also from Kingdale Clark. Walter, can you ask Richard his thoughts on the writer Wei Wu Wei?
Yeah.
When he said being is non-being, fullness is, I can't read this. emptiness, manifestation springs from manifestation, and there is no time. There's like, I don't know, the words are all kind of messed up on there.
I wouldn't worry
Um,
because I know what I'm going to
yeah.
say anyway.
Yeah, okay, go for it.
I read, well, yeah, I don't get on with him. That's all I can say. You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. It appeals to some people, great, wonderful, but somebody, I haven't come across him. Terence, I can't remember his Western name, but somebody rushed up to me
Terence Gray.
years ago, I think after a Tony Parsons meeting actually, and sort of started thrusting him at me various pages, and they loved him, and I just read about it. Nah, it's not for me. That's all I can say. No.
Okay.
Too many words for me. I should not say that because I've written a lot of words myself, but anyway, there you go.
Well, if there's anybody in the Zoom, just go right ahead. Otherwise, I'll just keep going with the questions from the chat. The next one is about the seeing of liberation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about the seeing of liberation?
Say
Like,
more about
well, in terms of what sees,
yeah.
how do you explain that there is a seeing if there's nothing separate to see something else? It sounds dualistic almost, that there's
Yeah.
a seeing
Yeah.
of liberation. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Again, it's just language. I mean, I was going to say the first part of what you said there is easy. You know, who sees liberation? Nobody does. If there's someone there seeing liberation, it isn't liberation. And yeah, I get that it sounds dualistic. Again, all I can say is it's the nature of language. Language is dualistic. It's the nature of language. So everything that is said or written about this could be criticized on those grounds. But nevertheless, if we're going to talk about, we don't have to talk about this, but if we're going to talk about this, we have to use language, and the language we use has to be dualistic. But yeah, seeing of liberation by no one. There's no one there to see it. If there's someone there seeing it, it ain't liberation. By the way, I was thinking actually, this thought came to me a day or two or three ago. You know, I mean, we write what we write at the time that we write it, and I, you know, referred to liberation and da, da, da. I think if I was writing that stuff now, I wouldn't. I'd use the verb instead of the noun, because the noun fixes it, doesn't it? It's that language. It makes it sound like a thing, like a state in this case, not a thing, an object, but a thing, a state. It's not. Like everything else, there is only stuff happening. There's no stuff. There's only happening. And so I think now I wouldn't refer to liberation. I'd refer, you know, to liberating happening, as in it's always, if you like, words fail me. So I was going to say it's always a process, but of course the trouble with the process is it's back to taking place in time, you see. So we're hopelessly stuck with language. If we want to be precise about this, it's just absolutely hopeless.
Well, from the chat, how do you drive safely when there's no 3D? And, oh, okay, there's two questions from JL in the chat. So start with that one. How do you drive safely when there's no 3D?
I don't drive safely. No one drives safely. Driving safely or dangerously happens. So it makes no difference whether there's 3D or 2D. No one has ever driven a car safely or dangerously, but driving happens. Oneness drives dangerously or safely. Yeah.
Natalie's driving safely, hopefully. Yep, she's got her seatbelt on. That's good. Next one. Does anything make you really angry?
No, nothing makes me really angry, but real anger can arise. Nothing makes you really angry either, but maybe real anger can arise there. Yeah, anything can happen. Yeah. In fact, I would say that what I call natural emotions, and by natural emotions, I mean not neurotic emotions. And for example, let's stick with anger. So anger is a real emotion, a real feeling. Irritation is not. Irritation's a neurotic feeling. What often happens when what we're talking about is seen is that neurotic feelings like irritation tend to diminish or disappear. But natural feelings such as anger or joy, it doesn't have to be anger, can often get stronger. So there may be, for example, when this is seen, there may be less irritation but more anger. This has got nothing to do with, getting into some kind of blessed, holy, holy state where there is only, peace and love, man. But, there might be peace and love, man, as well. I mean, that's nice sometimes too. Sorry, I probably gave my age away a bit there when I went like that.
Peace and love. Well, we're down to our last 10 minutes here. So if there's anyone in the Zoom that wants to jump in, just want to give you an opportunity. Just go ahead.
Hi.
There you
Hi,
go.
Walter.
Hello.
Just loving this, really enjoying hearing you talk. Do you have a live meeting at all on the cards in London, maybe?
Yeah, probably. I haven't advertised it yet because it hasn't been fixed 100%, but probably I think it's February the 18th. If February the 18th is a Saturday, which I'm not sure it is, February the 18th.
No, because
23rd.
Tony Parsons on the 17th and 18th.
No, it's not then. I deliberately avoided that. You're right. It must be the following Saturday, to whatever date that is. But I will be advertising it in the next day or two, or in the next week anyway. Yeah.
Right.
And the important thing about that one, unlike most of my meetings, it has to be booked in advance because it's in a limited space. But I'll put the details out there. Yeah.
All right. Yes. Yeah.
And abroad?
Is Tony's on the
17th and 18th.
It's the 17th of Saturday?
Yes.
Yeah, so mine will be 7 days later. What I added, 24th. There you go.
24th. But that's a private one then, private group. I couldn't find it on your website.
No, it's not private, it's public, but because it's a smaller room than usual, you have to book in advance because it's limited space. So no, it's not private at all. It's just, first.
And that's through the meetup, is that right? It's
you can book it, you'll be able to book it through the meetup group or directly by emailing me once the details are out. It'll be on my website. What's the other thing? I've forgotten the other thing. But anyway, yeah, it'll be out there. And you just email me and make sure you're one of the first 12 or 13 people, because that'll be the size of the group. Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, and after that, we might be back to the bigger room where you don't have to book, you just turn up. Yeah.
Okay, lovely.
Okay.
Smashing.
And are you planning events abroad?
Well, it's more a case of, is anybody else planning events abroad? Before COVID, I went abroad regularly, mostly to Germany, but also to France and the Czech Republic and a few other places, even Tokyo, but they're always organized by other people, and that's all stopped with COVID. So, the answer is I'll go abroad if somebody invites me to.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We had a question in the chat here, said, has aging slowed down?
I'm just going to assume that in the spirit in which that question is asked, then I'll say no. But I mean, I'm interpreting the question. I might be interpreting it wrongly. There's no time, and yet aging doesn't slow down. Isn't that bizarre? That's really weird. Yeah, it's a good question.
Wonderful. So is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap it up?
Me? No, I'm.
Yeah.
No,
Okay, all right.
I mean, I'm, really great questions. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Good discussion. Yeah.
And your website, and you already mentioned all that, email list and everything?
Yeah, if you want to be sure of knowing when meetings are, you can either email me, richardsylvester@hotmail.co.uk, or join my meetup group, or look at my website, just richardsylvester.com. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And yeah, sorry if you couldn't get in. Once I saw there was trolls in here, I stopped allowing new people into the room. So if you were trying to get in, I just trying to prevent any interruptions. And also just want to mention, you can join the Chatting Non-duality Facebook group if you want to be notified of what events are happening. Richard and I will do this monthly, and so I'll post that there. I share the events there. And somebody asked about where to get the Zoom link. I share the Zoom link on that Facebook page, Chatting Non-duality. So that's the way that it's pretty much every Monday. We do this Q&A, so you can join me again next week. So with that, say thank you, everybody, and we'll see you the next time.
Okay.
Thank you, Walter, as well.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Okay. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.